The throne room reeked of ozone and burnt flesh. Princess Vel'thara Nixis of House Korathi pressed herself against the obsidian wall, her 4 eyes wide with something she had never felt before in her 23 cycles of life, pure animal terror. Around her, 11 bodies lay in various states of ruin. Korathi assassins in matte black void armor, the finest killers the Shadow Covenant could buy. And standing in the center of them, breathing hard, blood running from a gash above his eyebrow, was the human she had spent 3 months humiliating. Marcus Webb didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who had just survived something he shouldn't have. His borrowed ceremonial jacket was torn at the shoulder. His knuckles were split open. In his hand, he held a combat knife that hadn't been standard issue. He'd modified it himself, back when she'd laughed at him for playing with human toys. 12, he said quietly, counting the last assassin crumpling against the far pillar. That's 12. Vel'thara's translator implant crackled against her collarbone. She couldn't speak. 3 months of insults, lesser species, meat shield, disposable ape, crawled back up her throat and lodged there like poison. He looked at her then, and there was no anger in his eyes. Just exhaustion, and something worse, disappointment. You still don't know why they sent me, he said. She didn't. And that terrified her more than the assassins had. 3 days earlier, the Korathi royal palace on Ves Prime glittered like a wound cut into obsidian rock, its spires catching the violet light of the system's dying star. Princess Vel'thara had been assigned a bodyguard, a human of all things, as part of the unity accords between Earth and the Korathi Empire. It was, in her opinion, an insult dressed up diplomacy. He's this tall, she'd said the day he arrived, looking down at Marcus Webb from her throne dais, her 4 eyes narrowing with disdain. Earth sent me a servant boy. Marcus had said nothing. He'd simply saluted, the way soldiers do, and taken his position by the door. That silence had infuriated her more than any argument could have. For weeks, she tested him. She ordered him to carry her ceremonial trains like a servant. She mocked his primitive sidearm in front of the court. She once asked, in front of 40 nobles, whether humans had evolved from vermin, since he flinched at nothing and startled at nothing, and seemed, in her words, bred for obedience, not thought. Marcus took it all, not with submission. She noticed that even then, though she refused to admit it, but with the patience of a man who had decided, long before arriving on Ves Prime, that her opinion of him was irrelevant to the job he'd been sent to do. What she didn't know, what nobody at court knew, was that Marcus Webb had not been sent by Earth's diplomatic corps at all. He'd been sent by Earth's Shadow Directorate, the quiet agency that existed in the space between wars, because 3 months before his arrival, Earth's intelligence network had intercepted a fragment of Korathi court communication, a bounty placed by persons unknown on the life of Princess Vel'thara Nixis. The reason for the bounty was the twist nobody saw coming. But that wasn't the biggest surprise waiting in the dark corners of the palace. Marcus's first 6 weeks were spent doing something the princess never noticed, mapping every guard rotation, every servant's schedule, every ventilation shaft in the East Wing. He memorized the palace not as a soldier memorizes a battlefield, but as a man memorizes a maze he knows he'll have to run blind. At night, while the princess slept behind her golden barrier words, Marcus sat in the servants' corridor outside her chambers, cleaning a knife that wasn't standard Earth military issue. It had been forged for him personally by a retired Korathi weaponsmith named Drexa Ilorn, an old woman who had once served the Korathi military and now lived in exile in the palace's lower levels, disgraced for reasons the court preferred not to discuss. "You're not really her bodyguard, are you?" Drexa asked him one night, sharpening a blade of her own. "I'm exactly her bodyguard," Marcus said. "That's the problem. Everyone assumes bodyguard means furniture." Drexa laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "The Korathi believe strength is loud. Armor, rank, voice. You people," she gestured at him with her chin. "Your strength is quiet. That's why they never see you coming." Marcus didn't answer, but he filed the words away, She had made a mistake she didn't even know she'd made. The 7th week brought the first attempt. Subtle, deniable. The kind of attack a court could pretend never happened. Someone tampered with the princess's private shuttle, a catastrophic engine failure timed for her routine flight to the outer temple district. Marcus pulled her out of the pilot's seat 4 minutes before launch, citing a gut feeling he refused to explain. She screamed at him in front of the launch crew, calling him paranoid, calling him an embarrassment, ordering him removed from her service. 2 hours later, the shuttle's reactor core detonated on the empty launch pad. Vel'thara didn't apologize. Korathi royalty didn't apologize to servants, and in her mind, that's still all he was. But that night, alone in her chambers, she found herself staring at the door where he stood guard, and for the first time she wondered, quietly, privately, how did he know? She never asked him. Pride wouldn't allow it. The court had already made its decision. And it would cost them everything by the 9th week, the Shadow Covenant, the Empire's most feared network of contract killers. Employed by nobles too cowardly to dirty their own hands, had grown impatient. The princess's death had been purchased for reasons buried in a decade-old scandal involving her late mother, a scandal Marcus had already partially uncovered through Drex's whispered history lessons and his own quiet digging through the palace archive terminals. Vel'thara's mother, the former queen, had discovered evidence that 3 of the Empire's ruling houses were smuggling weapons to a hostile border faction. Weapons that had, 6 years later, been used to slaughter a Korathi colony of 11,000 civilians. The queen had died in what was officially recorded as an unfortunate accident before she could expose them. Vel'thara, the twist revealed, wasn't just a spoiled princess to be humiliated and dismissed. She was a loose thread the conspirators had never managed to cut, and now, with her coming-of-age ceremony 3 days away, a ceremony that would grant her full access to her mother's sealed private records. Someone had decided the thread needed cutting permanently before she could pull it. Marcus had known this for 2 weeks. He'd said nothing, because telling her too early would have gotten them both killed. The night of the attack, Vel'thara had thrown one final insult at him, the cruelest yet, about human soldiers being bred like livestock for war, disposable and unloved by the empires that used them. She said it in front of the entire evening court, and for the first time, something in Marcus's expression cracked. Not anger, but grief, old and deep, the kind that comes from losing people the same way, over and over, and being told it doesn't matter. He didn't respond. He simply excused himself and returned to his post. 2 hours later, the palace's power grid failed. Not an accident, Marcus knew instantly, but the opening move of a coordinated strike. 12 Shadow Covenant operatives, void, armored, and silent, breached the East Wing through 3 separate access points simultaneously. Everything changed in the next 60 seconds. Marcus didn't wait for the alarm. He'd already memorized every corridor, every blind spot, every place a body could hide. He moved through the dark with the calm of a man executing a plan he'd rehearsed 100 times in his head. Because he had, the first 2 assassins never saw him. He used the dark, their own preferred weapon, against them, disabling their comm relays before they could signal the others. The third fought back, and Marcus took a blade wound to the forearm that would scar him for the rest of his life. But he didn't stop moving toward the throne room, because that's where she was, and that's where they wanted her dead. By the time he reached her chambers, 4 more had already breached her outer door. Vel'thara stood frozen, her royal training utterly useless against an enemy that didn't care about court etiquette or bloodline or divine right. "Get behind me!" Marcus said, not a request, not deference, but a command, the first he had ever given her. For once in her life, Vel'thara obeyed without argument. What followed was not the graceful, effortless heroism of legend. Marcus was hit twice. He broke his own hand, disabling an assassin's neural disruptor. He used Drex's knife, the quiet weapon for a quiet strength, to end the fight that Earth-standard sidearms couldn't have finished fast enough. He was not unstoppable. He was simply better prepared and willing to bleed for someone who had shown him nothing but contempt. The princess had overlooked one crucial detail. Contempt doesn't change duty, which brings us back to the throne room. 12 bodies cooling on obsidian stone, and a human bodyguard asking a question the princess finally understood. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew this whole time, and you never told me why you were really here." "Would you have believed me?" Marcus asked. 3 months ago, would you have believed a human?" She had no answer because the honest answer was no, and they both knew it. Marcus knelt, wincing, and pressed something into her hand, a data chip he'd pulled from Drex's archives days earlier. Her mother's real research, the truth about the smuggled weapons, the names of the houses who had ordered tonight's attack. "Your mother died trying to protect people who never thanked her for it," Marcus said. "I'm not doing this for gratitude, princess. I never was." Vel'thara looked at the human she had mocked for 3 months. The servant boy, the lesser species, the disposable ape, and for the first time saw him clearly. Not weak, not primitive, but a soldier who had bled 12 times over for a crown that had never once respected him. She knelt beside him on the cold stone floor, royal robes forgotten, and for the first time in her privileged life, bowed her head to another being. "Thank you," she said, "Marcus Webb." He managed a tired, crooked smile. "Took you long enough, Your Highness." Outside, the dying star of Ves Prime rose over a palace that would never see the Karathi Empire the same way again. And somewhere in the void beyond, 12 failed contracts sent a single message rippling across the galaxy's underworld: never underestimate what humanity sends to guard the ones it loves.